Welcome back to Definitely Not Definitive. I'm Ken.
And I'm Bethany.
And we're just an elegant couple in love that loves reacting to some Elden Ring.
Well, we're elegant today.
And today we're checking out more Vadi for some Elden Ring lore. We're checking out the Elden Ring bosses that serve the Golden Order. So if you want all of our Golden Ring. If you want all of our Elden Ring reactions, check out the description of this video. We got a playlist there for you, as well as a link to our Patreon. You can get early ad-free access to videos like this. All right, so before we start.
It's time for a drink.
Yeah.
All right, so this is the Tarnished Tonic. Ooh. We got Bucky on my lap, and he's very interested in alcohol, which is very bad.
Yep.
He's much too young.
Cheers.
Cheers. Kid, what have we talked about? You're way too young. And you're a dog, so you don't get any.
Many of Elden Ring's bosses serve Marika's Golden Order in some shape or form, whether they're loyal to it or enslaved by it. So let's discuss all of these bosses.
Forced loyalty.
Starting at a time before Order had even come to the lands between. To the north are Mountaintops of the Giants, a name that makes it abundantly clear just who dominated this region of the world. However, it was not always this way. According to the Borealis' mist incantation, the ice dragons were once lords of the mountaintops long ago, until they were defeated by the fire giants and chased from the peak. And perched upon this peak stands an enormous forge. Interestingly, the chain rings of this forge depict dragons, which might be a reference to the dragons that once dwelt here.
Or serpents.
And while I don't think we can say for sure who built this forge, the art of smithing is said to have originated among the giants, and the craft was even once considered divine. So it seems likely that at the very least, they made good use of this fire. Sparks from this forge would fall down and fertilize the smoldering flowers that bloomed upon the mountaintops, and it seems like it was a pretty crucial part of life in this region.
Mm-hmm.
The most ancient giants here were called fire giants, and according to the Burn of Flame incantation, they long held a solitary curse to serve as keepers of the flame for eternity. Now, traditionally in From Software games, curses are the domain of the gods, and indeed, the fire giants are cited to have borrowed power from one such god, who is represented here by a single large red eye.
That looks fucking awesome.
It's called a god of the flame, and it's believed to be able to inhabit fire itself, as well as the bodies of the fire giants who worshipped it. The giants shared borders with the astrologers, who, according to their legendary Sword of Night and Flame, established themselves in the mountaintops and considered the fire giants their neighbors. The relationship here is implied to be friendly, even collaborative, maybe, as the sword does combine the power of both flame and the power of the primeval current that's glimpsed within the night sky.
Oh, pretty.
The sword would go on to become a treasure of the Carrion royal family, and the Carrions themselves are likely descendants of the astrologers. Generations later, these Carrion royals would call upon their old giant allies for aid, but we'll get to that in a moment. The fire giants also had another neighbor, with whom relations were not so amicable. Further down the mountains, just past the Forbidden Lands, roamed the Knights of Zamor. According to their armor, these long-lived warriors, clad in biting, freezing winds, are said to have been the mortal enemies of the fire giants since time immemorial.
So
according
to
their weaponry, these beings were devoted to winter itself, and had weapons styled after icy winds and bodies that were cloaked in swirling ice storms. It makes good sense that such cold beings would be natural mortal enemies of the fire giants, and they commonly did challenge their larger rivals. But it seems like their true chance came when Queen Marika waged war against the fire giants, and the Knights of Zamor gladly joined her offensive. They earned great renown amongst the Order of the Erd Tree, and many ancient heroes of Zamor became hailed as heroes, as the fire giants were largely wiped from the face of the earth after this war. Now, up until now, I've resisted calling the giants evil, but the reality is that in pretty much every item description, their god is described as a fell god, and the giant's flame is a flame of ruin, And to be fair, their god doesn't seem like a super nice guy. I mean, it only really opens its eye when the fire giant boss sacrifices a leg, which is pretty metal. But I'm sort of giving them the benefit of the doubt because I think it's pretty clear who's writing the history about this fell god here. The many mentions of this god as evil clearly come about because fire itself was just this extremely taboo topic during Marika's Age of the Erd Tree. And it's not just Giant's Flame items that mention this. Fire in general was prohibited to those who served the Erd Tree, which was a pretty smart defensive measure, especially considering that many rival outer gods also have a flame of their own. The Formless Mother has Blood Flame, the Three Fingers have Frenzied Flame, the outer god of Death has Ghost Flame, but Giant's Flame in particular was capable of burning the Erd Tree, and that is a fact that clearly inspired the inevitable war with the giants. So the giants were deemed mortal enemies of the Erd Tree, and they allegedly desolated nature, triggered avalanches, and whipped up storms of flame with their roars. Clearly those who served the Erd Tree were afraid, and perhaps rightfully so. And so, led by Lord Godfrey, the forces of the Erd Tree went to war. The fire giants borrowed from the power of the fell god to fight against the Erd Tree, but were defeated nonetheless. According to the Burn O' Flame incantation, this released the fire giants from their curse to serve as keepers of the flame, all except one, who the fell god still hides within. And upon realizing that the giant's flame would never die, Marika left this last giant alive, knowing it was bound to protect the flame for all eternity, and thus leaving it cursed to protect the flame from someone like us. In addition to the Knights of Zamor, many lesser giants were also roped into the war against the fire giants. These lesser giants are called trolls, and are confirmed to be a race that is descended from the giants. This relationship is clearer at the mountaintops, where the trolls here still cast Giant's Flame incantations. Troll hammers were even once used as ancient ceremonial smithing tools. Thus it seems evident that the trolls and the fire giants coexisted for a time, and then fell further and further apart. Because while some trolls are assumedly still fire giants at heart, many now are not. In fact, at the heart of most trolls is nothing. There's this suspicious hollow here, almost as if something has been ripped out of their torso. And when you consider what's upon the torso of the last remaining fire giant, the truth becomes pretty clear, right? Every single troll is now missing that giant eye of their outer god. And if you manage to look really closely here at a troll, we realize that in its place is this strange stone tablet that is held in place by what look like roots. As pointed out by Quelaag, these rooted tablets are very reminiscent of the rooted shackles that were created to bind the Omen twins, Mohg and Morgoth, which might suggest that the trolls are also being shackled or suppressed by Marika in some way. This is just speculation, of course, but Marika does have this suspicious set of stone tablets in her chambers, and I think it's a good theory, for sure.
Yeah, no.
A sword gravestone in the mountaintops elaborates further on the trolls' role in the War of the Giants. Here, champions battled, and allegedly, the trolls betrayed. But what was the nature of this betrayal? Did these lesser giants resent their larger kin, or did Marika force this betrayal in some way with the stone shackles? I think that's largely up to you guys. But whatever the case, nowadays the trolls are said to have lost their minds and are inseparable from the weight of their rusty swords, which have long since lost any trace of gold. So whether they carry coffins or mine down at the bedrock of the earth, their sad state brings to mind enslavement now, more than anything else. That said, some trolls do seem to have a little bit more dignity, and these are the ones that fought against the Erd Tree later on. These were the enchanted troll knights, deemed comrades of the young Renala, and they were called into service when the queen invoked an oath that they swore long ago. As mentioned earlier, the trolls go way back to when the fire giants and the astrologers were still neighbors, and back then it seems for whatever reason, they swore an oath to the astrologers. And later, when the Carrions went to war against the Erd Tree, I assume, the trolls were finally called into that service to be treated as true knights of Caria, wielding swords embedded with blue glintstone and summoning enormous glint blades. They fought arm in arm with their long-lost human comrades.
Oh, cool.
E.G.
Like ghost
is another such example of that relationship, by the way. He became the Carrion family's royal blacksmith, and unlike the Stone Digger trolls, he actually uses that weapon for its intended purpose as a blacksmith's hammer, and now he serves the Lady Rani, who he's known ever since her childhood. Next, I want to talk about the Knights Cavalry. These recurring bosses wander the dim roads at night, and were once led by the Fell Omen. Now, this description specifically references Margit's title as the Fell Omen, not Morgoth's title as the Omen King, and I think this is important because Margit represents this undercover extension of Morgoth, who scouts further out in the world and takes out champions who approach all the way from Stormvale Castle. Morgoth's big role in the story is that he's a stout defender of the Erd Tree who wouldn't dare betray the Golden Order. He calls all the other demigods willful traitors all, simply for fighting over the great runes of the Elden Ring. Even Radahn, who has a lot of signs of being quite loyal to the Golden Order, is called a traitor, simply because he fights at one stage another character who has a great rune. You can even see Morgoth in one of these opening cutscene cinematics leaping onto what looks like Radahn, and managing to even get an attack off on one of the mightiest of the demigods. Actually, a channel named Smotown has a really good little video discussing whether this is indeed Radahn, and I'd highly recommend you go and check that out. Anyway, my point is, the Knights Cavalry seem to fulfill a similar role to Margit. According to their armor, they were deliverers of death for great warriors, knights, and champions. Simple as that. No motive is listed, except that they have a reputation for taking out the greatest warriors of the world. And that makes sense that that would be their aim, because only the strongest can acquire 2 great runes and approach the Erd Tree, so it's almost as if strength itself must be stifled so that Morgoth's failing order might be maintained. As for why Margit defends Stormvale, I like to think that he's fighting here because he recognizes that Godric is the weakest of the demigods, who yet remains, so he's bolstering his strength in that sense and trying to maintain this unsteady stalemate. Having a strong defense is essentially the guiding principle of those who serve the Erd Tree, especially as you get closer to the capital. There are numerous examples of this. The soldiers of Leyndell fight their battles defensively. The knights of Leyndell always put their shield before the sword, and Leyndell itself, the city, is built to withstand siege, with layers and layers of defensive measures built in. And the protective standard to which all defenders of the Erd Tree aspire is that of the Tree Sentinels, whose order became the living rampart of the Erd Tree, embellished with golden tree-crested armor and shields that can retaliate with bolts of light. They turn defense into offense, and that's the idea in Leyndell. Defense is the best offense, and the way this idea is presented is just such beautiful storytelling. So many characters in other areas of the lands between long to return to the blessed land of the Erd Tree, and even for you, it's this goal that looms over you the entire game. So the path is designed to repel everyone getting close. You know, the highway through Leonia has fallen apart, so you need to take this secret, waterlogged route up through the mountain. This was my favorite part of the game, by the way, finding this secret path through the mountains and infiltrating the Altus Plateau. And then when you finally get there, there are countless ballista and golem archers, and they're all positioned facing outwards. And finally, you even find a side entrance to Leyndell, and that is even guarded by a tree sentinel. And it's not just any tree sentinel. This one is actually a draconic tree sentinel, which is kind of different. This variant of sentinels arose after the ancient dragons attacked Palmdale in its history, and we talk more about this event in the video about the demigods.
Crazy looking shield and
in the
weapon.
end, the ancient dragons were befriended, and worship of the ancient dragons was deemed acceptable alongside belief in the Erd Tree. Dragons were conjoined with the Golden Order, so to speak, and the dragon cultists took after them in a physical fashion. Also instrumental to the rise of the Erd Tree were the Crucible Knights. They were eventually scorned for their strength, for their appearance, and for their close resemblance to Chaos and how that inspired who they originally were. 16 of these knights served Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, and all 16 of them yet remain across the lands between. One is imprisoned in an Everjail, 2 appear to be dead and are summoned to fight you as spirits. A number of Crucible Knights still patrol Palmdale, some protect great tree roots, though most just stand dejected in lost corners of the earth, and one of them has even found a new blasphemous master. So, the next time you fight these, think carefully about where they are and who they're fighting with, because each knight is a distinct character, with purpose, or lack thereof, even though they were all once united by a common purpose and a single lord. Many of these knights fight with different aspects of the Crucible. Some fight with wings, some with horns, fire, and tail, but what they all have in common is their mastery of their Lord Godfrey's signature stomp attack, which breaks up the earth beneath their feet. This is such a cool homage to Godfrey. Knowing the lore is great. It definitely makes dying to it feel a little bit better. Anyway, I think it's important to remember that Godfrey and his Crucible Knights existed in an age before the Erd Trees, an age with the Great Tree in its primordial form, back when there was this red-tinted crucible of life, and these were warriors who drew power from its chaos. Eventually, however, they were brought on board with order, which is best exemplified by Godfrey being tamed by the Beast Regent upon his back. There are 2 types of ornamentation that the Crucible Knights can have. There's axe ornamentation, which is worn by Crucible Knight Ordovus and his men, and I think the axe is a bit of a homage to Godfrey again. And then there are some knights that have great tree ornamentation, and these are displayed by the knight Soluria and her men, which is of course a reference to the Great Tree itself. And I'd like to quickly talk about the Great Tree. In one of my first lore videos, I proposed that there was a great tree that must have existed before the Erd Tree, and that the Erd Tree might have even replaced this great tree. This was based on the English root resin item description, which has the word Great Tree capitalized and as one word, which certainly makes you think that it's a distinct tree, right? The line is, "The roots of the Great Tree once linked to those of the Erd Tree," which is a line that seems to clearly set up that these are 2 separate trees. Except the Japanese translation doesn't say that. Japanese translation says, "These roots are said to have once been connected to the Golden Tree." It does mention the Great Tree earlier, but it seems to just be referencing the Erd Tree as that great tree, because it is a really big tree. Some people have taken this to mean that there was no Great Tree before the Erd Tree, and while that's certainly possible, I do think it's still fair to argue that a Great Tree existed before the Erd Tree. For one, many of the Crucible Knight items reference a primordial form of the Erd Tree, and they have ornamentation and history that is based on this primordial holiness that is not the holiness of the Erd Tree. So calling it a Great Tree might just be referencing that tree. And secondly, Soluria defends a giant tree in the deep root depths. It's one that has this hollowed out entrance that is reminiscent of the entrance at the Erd Tree as well. So maybe there's something here. I just kind of wanted to set that straight for now. But the reality is that we don't really know for sure, and hopefully DLC will shed a light on some of these past ages of the world, which seems to be a common trend with From Software DLC, and there just really are so many remnants of previous ages in this game, and I'd love to see a little bit more about what their cultures really were like. It kind of makes you resent just how all-encompassing the Erd Tree became. So many of these cultures have been lost, and I guess that's how a lot of characters in-game feel as well. They feel upset by that, and knowing this fact helps you understand why so many of these characters are okay with burning down the Erd Tree. They're totally fine with that. And this brings us to our next boss, because in the act of burning down the Erd Tree, you release a slew of ulcerated tree spirits from it. These spirits lie suffering beneath the ash until you come along. But of course you fight many of these tree spirits across the lands between, even before the end game. There's an ulcerated tree spirit at the husk of this minor Erd Tree, there's a bunch in catacomb dungeons by great tree roots, there's even one at the husk of the Halig Tree. There's a lot of these. Some might even say there's too many of these bosses. I think they're the worst boss in Elden Ring. But anyway, understanding their lore might make it a bit more palatable. So, while these creatures fight near the trees, I don't think they're defending them. Rather, I kind of think they're this corrupted byproduct of dead or dying trees. We know that one of the new purposes of the Erd Tree is to accept spirits and allow them to live on, and it's almost like these ulcerated spirits are this horrific failure of that process. One of Miyazaki's favorite themes in these games is the idea that life is not supposed to be eternal, and I think these spirits are a physical manifestation of stagnation and decay. They're this product of an age of an Erd Tree that really should have ended a long time ago. Most tree spirits drop golden seeds, which are also found at the base of smaller illusory trees, and they read, "When the Elden Ring was shattered, these seeds flew from the Erd Tree, scattering across the various lands, as if life itself knew that its end had come." A talisman also goes on to say, "The Erd Tree was once perfect and eternal, and thus it was believed that Erd Tree seeds could not exist. This was back when there was an age of plenty, when blessings literally dripped from the boughs of the Erd Tree like sap. And the Erd Tree's warm light healed those who bathed in its rays. The Erd Tree flourished with abundance, yet it was only for a fleeting moment. Such is the course of all life." Then the leaves began to fall, and as you know from the introduction and the endings, the fallen leaves tell a story. The story is that the Erd Tree was withering. Scattered across the lands between are minor Erd Trees, where you go to collect crystal tears. Basins were placed at the feet of minor Erd Trees in order to collect these tears, though in some cases these tears are dropped by Erd Tree avatars instead. When the Elden Ring was shattered, the avatars emerged, wielding ceremonial staffs that depict the Erd Tree in its historic radiance. These creatures are the will of the dying Erd Tree, made manifest, I think. They are literally part tree, after all, and they fight desperately to protect the minor Erd Trees, which are the offspring of the withering Erd Tree itself. Some avatars placed in Caelid and Miquella's Halig Tree are rotten avatars, and they even have this uniquely designed staff that festers with rot, just as they do. Remember, the Halig Tree is also an emulation of the Erd Tree, so it makes sense that it has its own avatars as well. And they fight on, because to many of these creatures, any Erd Tree, whether it's minor or a copy or doomed, is something worth protecting. So, if you've made it all the way to the end of this video,
we have.
Chances are you love this kind of long-form content,
Yeah.
so an Audible subscription might also be just right for you. Sign up at audible.com/VartyVidya.
Well done. Nice transition there.
Or text
Varty.
VartyVidya to 500 and you'll get a free credit for the first month and then again for every paid month thereafter. But this time, I'd recommend you spend that credit on The Sandman, which might be just one of the most unique audiobooks that you've ever listened to. It has
Good show.
its own cast of voice actors, including the author, Neil Gaiman himself, who narrates, as well as sound effects and music. It's an incredible introduction to the story that a lot of people are talking about right now.
All right, so what I found most interesting was the fact that he said that those that worship the Erd Tree thought that defense was the best offense, and really valued that. However, they went on offense with the fire giants because the fire giants pose a threat to the Erd Tree. Because, I mean, he never said that the fire giants ever their goal was to destroy the Erd Tree, or they had a hatred for the Erd Tree and those that worship the Erd Tree. It was just that they had a fire that could kill the Erd Tree. It almost seemed like in order to protect the Erd Tree, we need to kill anything that could kill the Erd Tree. before they can get the chance for that. So they went on the offense there. So I just found that interesting.
Well, two thoughts come to mind with what you just said. One is, it's easy to say that defense is the best offense when your defense is like a light shield that repels attacks right back at the people attacking you. You know, like,
yeah.
Yes, you have a privilege of being able to say defense is the best offense because your defense is freaking awesome.
Yeah.
But then the other thing that sprang to mind as you were talking about that was something I don't think I'd really considered before, which was just kind of the people of this land, and particularly the people under America's rule, and how it's actually a fear-based people. Because their response to anything that could threaten the Erd Tree is to kill, which is a fear-based response.
Yeah.
And I just don't think I'd ever, like, as we were watching any of these before, sat here and thought, you know, I wonder about the psychology of these people in this kingdom and, like, what are they all about? But in saying that, that's a really fair point. I mean, I think there's, and this isn't a criticism per se, because it is sort of a uniquely human thing. It is the shadow side of humanity. There's, you know, I've talked about it before, there's like a light and a shadow side to everything. Well, the shadow side of humanity is to destroy what I do not understand. I am afraid of what I do not understand, therefore I will destroy it, and I will never have to understand it. Kind of lazy and fear-based and a bit hateful, but that's the shadow side of humanity. And so they go on the attack with these trolls who aren't necessarily terrible creatures, but will become terrible creatures under threat because now they're being attacked. So likely they have to defend themselves and attack back. And that's the story throughout history. One group of people doesn't understand another group of people, so they go to destroy them. That group of people then has to defend themselves and attack back. Well, now that feeds into the narrative of, look at them, they're so terrible, they're so violent. Well, anybody being attacked is gonna be violent. I mean, it takes like that 1 in a million Gandhi person to be like, no, it's okay if I'm being attacked. I'm just gonna sit here and be peaceful. That's a wonderful response, but that's not like an average human response. The average human response is, you attack me, I'm gonna attack back. I'm gonna defend myself.
Also, I like how Vadi pointed out that, they say that history is, you know, written by the winners. And so the fire giants were portrayed as being evil and malevolent. And he said that he thought the source of all of them was like from like America, and like, you know, it came from a specific source, and like they're painting a specific picture to say that like, oh no, we had to attack them because they're malevolent and malicious. And so they were going to attack the Erd Tree eventually. And they have the only thing that could kill the Erd Tree, and, you know, it was just a matter of time before they did, so we had to kill them first. Again, it's just like I don't know, the politics, again, like you said, like I never thought like about the politics involved in Elden Ring too much until this episode.
You know, it's funny because as you talk about that, I'm thinking, I like can hear the final song in Hamilton, the who lives, who dies, who tells your story. And simultaneously, I'm also hearing in a strong and beautiful Scottish accent, history is written by those who have hanged heroes, which is from the opening of Braveheart.
Yeah.
And it's true. I mean, all of our history textbooks, they're written from the perspective of a group of people, a group of academic people, a group of hopefully well-informed people. But the way that we cover the American Revolution is very different here in America than how they cover it in England. Like, talking to friends in England, it was like a footnote in their history class. I mean, it was so not important.
Well, because they have such a longer history than the Americans.
That's true, too. Yes, they have much more to cover. But, you know, for America, it's like, this is the birth of our nation, and it's huge. And yes, you know, England and King George was the bad guy at this point, but it's okay. We became best friends after that. Like the perspective is what it is. You got to dive into those things that make you uncomfortable because like that's where it's at. That's how you grow and learn as a person. So it's interesting kind of like the evolution of us in the world today, and then also looking at something fictitious like Elden Ring and going like, I'm noticing some parallels here.
Yeah.
Some real things that are in our wonderful fantasy politics that are coming straight from the real world. But it's more fun and more palatable when it's over there in fantasy.
So you might hear sometimes the little snorts and snores
Little.
from our dog Foxy. So yeah, so she's you know.
She's sleeping.
Yeah, I mean, at one time, just you can't ignore it. Sometimes you try to ignore it and hope you can't hear it, but then other times like you just had to look over her and just laugh.
I mean, that one that she got me laughing at in the middle of this video was so loud that it woke up Bucky, who's in my lap right now, and he has not slept very much at all today. He's had a little bit of an upset tummy, so to wake him up takes work because like I've been able to manipulate like his legs and his ears and everything while he's in my lap, and nothing. He doesn't wake up at all, but her snort. It did the trick.
You'll let us know what you thought about this down below in the comments. And if you want all of our Elden Ring reactions, check out the description of this video. We got a playlist there for you. We got a link to our Patreon. You can get early ad-free access to our videos. Thanks so much for checking out our reaction for Elden Ring lore by Vadi, the lore of the Elden Ring bosses. But just keep in mind
that our reaction is definitely not definitive.